The party was in full swing. Laughter echoed through the grand living room of our suburban Chicago home, music blending with clinking glasses and light chatter. 60 years of my wife's life, celebrated with 70 friends and family. Yet something felt off. A tightness in my chest I couldn't shake, a gnawing feeling I couldn't explain. It was as though the air had shifted just a touch, but enough to make me uneasy. I wandered through the crowd, offering smiles and handshakes, but I couldn't quite settle. My wife Linda was chatting with our guests, looking radiant as always, but I kept my distance. It wasn't that I didn't enjoy the party. There was just this feeling deep in my gut that something wasn't right. Then Jake, my grandson, approached me. His face was pale, his eyes wide. He looked around as if checking for someone before stepping close enough to whisper, "Grandpa, we need to leave right now. I have something you need to hear." I froze for a second, staring down at him. His hands were trembling slightly, his voice strained. The party, the noise, it all faded into the background. "What is it, Jake?" I asked, trying to steady myself. His gaze flicked to the door, then back to me. It's about Mom and Dad." He swallowed hard, his lips pressing together for a moment before he continued. They're planning to put Grandma in a home, but not just any home, Grandpa. They want to drug her to make her forget everything. And then they'll take all her money, all her stuff. A cold wave of shock hit me. My throat went dry, and for a split second I couldn't find my voice. I thought I had heard him wrong. My son Ethan, my flesh and blood, was conspiring against his own mother. It didn't make sense. Jake reached into his pocket, pulling out his phone. "I recorded them, Grandpa. You need to hear this." His hands were shaky as he hit play. The sound of my son's voice came through the speakers, clear and calculating. "We'll slip the pills into her champagne just like we talked about. Once she's in the home, she won't even remember the house, let alone the money. We'll have everything." My stomach twisted as the words sank in. Ethan. My own son. The betrayal was suffocating. I wanted to scream, but I just stood there motionless, listening to the recording again. It was all there, every word, every plan. Jake's eyes were wide as he watched me. "They've already got the papers ready, Grandpa. I saw them fake power of attorney. They're going to do it tonight." I couldn't breathe. This wasn't some mistake. This wasn't some misunderstanding. My son, the man I had raised, was willing to destroy his own mother for money. It felt like the floor was crumbling beneath me. "Call the cops." Jake said, his voice barely a whisper. "We can't let them get away with it." Without a second thought, I pulled my phone from my pocket and dialed. The shock didn't make it any easier to think straight, but I knew one thing for sure: this wasn't just a family dispute. This was something far darker, something I could no longer ignore. We returned to the party without a word, the weight of what we knew hanging heavily between us. Jake stayed close, his eyes scanning the crowd as we made our way through the guests, careful not to draw attention. No one could know what was happening. Not yet. The music still played, the chatter still filled the room, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the party was nothing more than a facade. Beneath it, everything was falling apart. We'd already seen too much. Now the goal was to stop it before they could do anything. Jake looked up at me, his eyes wide but determined. "Grandma's okay, right? She'll be fine," I said, keeping my voice steady. But inside I wasn't so sure. We moved toward the corner where Linda was talking to some guests, laughing and sipping her drink. She had no idea what was going on. I couldn't bring myself to tell her yet. Not while everything was still in motion. She needed to stay calm. I needed her to stay calm. The guests continued to mingle, unaware of the storm brewing beneath the surface. I could feel the tension building as I watched Ethan and Lisa from across the room. They were too calm, too collected. Ethan was leaning in close to Lisa, whispering something in her ear, nodding subtly toward the bartender who was still serving drinks. I knew what that look meant. "Let's get closer," Jake muttered, his voice barely audible. We edged through the crowd, staying as inconspicuous as possible. As we got closer, I saw Ethan hand something to the bartender, a small vial, almost unnoticeable in his palm. My stomach twisted. The plan was moving forward. They were serious about it. Behind them, the familiar figure of Dr. Caldwell, a local physician I knew well, stood talking to some of the other guests. He looked too relaxed, too friendly. But I knew what his presence meant. He was here for one reason: to evaluate Linda, to make it official. A fraudulent assessment that would give Ethan and Lisa the power they needed to take everything. Grandpa Jake whispered again, his voice tight with worry. "What do we do? We wait," I said. My words clipped. There was no turning back now. We had to let this play out, but we couldn't let them get too far ahead. I turned my attention back to Ethan, watching as he casually made his way toward Linda. He had a smile on his face, but it didn't reach his eyes. His hands were in his pockets, relaxed as if nothing was wrong. It disgusted me. Lisa was closer now, subtly signaling to Dr. Caldwell. A few words exchanged, a few nods. The deal was being set right under everyone's nose. It sickened me that they could do this to her after everything, after all these years. I kept watching, but my mind was racing. How had I missed this? How had I missed what they were capable of? I thought I knew my son, thought I knew Lisa, but I'd been blind. Blinded by my own trust, my own belief that family meant something, that loyalty meant something. But this was different. "This isn't just about money," Jake muttered beside me, his voice barely above a whisper. "No," I replied, eyes still fixed on my son. "It's about control." Jake didn't respond, but I knew what he was thinking. We both knew. This wasn't the first time Ethan had shown signs of entitlement, but I'd never imagined it would go this far. I had to do something, but every step felt like a minefield. One wrong move, and everything could come crashing down. We stayed close to Linda, watching the events unfold, without making a sound. As Ethan and Dr. Caldwell exchanged a few quiet words, I saw the moment everything changed. The doctor slid a small folder into Ethan's hand. That folder contained the signed, forged documents papers that would make Linda's life and my life a nightmare. I clenched my fists, struggling to keep the anger in check. It wasn't just the betrayal that hurt. It was the way they'd manipulated everything the trust I had in them and my family turned into a weapon against me. Lisa came over to Linda, her smile wide fake. She handed her a glass of champagne, gently nudging her to take it. My stomach churned as Linda took the glass, not suspecting a thing. I glanced at Jake. His face was pale, his hands clenched into fists. "Not yet," I whispered, even though I knew we couldn't wait much longer. Jake's voice was strained when he spoke again. "Grandpa, do you think they'll get away with it? Not if I can help it?" But even as I said the words, a part of me wasn't so sure. Every move I made seemed to fall short, and the pressure was building. I could feel it weighing on me, suffocating me. But I had no choice but to push through. I had to protect her, protect Linda, for her sake, for Jake's sake, and somehow for my own. The party continued, but it wasn't the same. The laughter around me sounded hollow. Each joke, each toast was just a mask over the truth. And the truth was slowly becoming undeniable. My family, the people I had trusted most in this world, had betrayed me. They had betrayed all of us. The unexpected arrival threw everything off balance. Just as attention stayed fixed on Ethan and Lisa, the living room door swung open, and a sharply dressed stranger stepped inside, surveying the place with a confidence that didn't match any casual guest. His movements felt calculated, his gaze too precise, pausing in ways that suggested he wasn't here for conversation or drinks. Recognition flickered on Ethan's face first. A subtle shift in his posture, almost a straightening, gave away the truth before the stranger even crossed the room. Their eyes met, a silent exchange passing between them. Ethan nodded once and guided the man toward the corner where Dr. Caldwell stood. A lawyer. The realization hit like a cold stone. This scheme went far beyond greedy family members sniffing after property. This stranger wasn't here socially. He was a tool, a weapon part of Ethan's broader design. Paperwork, power of attorney documents, questionable medical evaluations. All of it now formed a far bigger picture. They weren't just maneuvering Linda into a nursing home, they were preparing to erase her completely from her own life. A heavy pressure settled in the chest. Efforts had focused so hard on blocking the immediate threat that the full scope of Ethan's plan hadn't taken shape until this moment. A network existed around him. Professionals, enablers, people who had been playing this game long before suspicion ever surfaced. Jake stood at my side, pale and tense. His gaze darted between the stranger and me, the truth sinking in for him as well. "We need to do something," he whispered, urgency cracking his voice. A nod came easily, but the mind spun. What could actually be done? Police needed concrete evidence, not instinct. The officers nearby had instructions to wait for a clear, undeniable trigger. A lawyer handing over documents hardly qualified. The weight of the situation deepened. Ethan wasn't just trying to grab a house. He had built an entire strategy to dismantle Linda's life piece by piece, using her vulnerability as leverage. Every instinct screamed that this was slipping out of control, that something irreversible was minutes away. Guilt crept in. How had the signs been missed? How had hope blinded judgment? Standing in that room surrounded by people who had been plotting made the entire world feel like it was tilting. Jake tugged at a sleeve, breaking the downward spiral. "Grandpa, do we go to the cops now? Do we just—" "No." The word came out firm, steadier than the turmoil inside. "Not yet. More proof is needed." Frustration twisted Jake's features as he glanced back at Ethan. How much longer they're getting away with it? No answer surfaced. Powerlessness was a bitter taste standing in a fight where half the rules remained hidden. Across the room, the lawyer handed Ethan a thick folder, the kind packed with forms and signatures designed to decide someone's fate. Recognition hit instantly. This wasn't a simple authorization. This was everything: control over property, medical decisions, financial accounts, paperwork that could rewrite Linda's future while she sat unaware in the next room. The moment landed like a blow to the ribs. Every second spent waiting felt like failure. Breathing tightened. Every instinct shouted to intervene, to snatch the folder from Ethan's hands, to drag the truth into the light. But this was a chess match played by professionals who hid behind legal language and forged assessments. One wrong move could ruin any chance of saving Linda. Jake pulled harder, guiding the retreat toward the kitchen. Fear shone clearly in his eyes as he asked, "Are we really just going to wait? What if we're too late?" No answer came. Only the weight of the moment and the dread that time was slipping away far too fast. The chaos started with a sudden flicker before the lights died completely. Music cut off mid-note, replaced by the sharp buzz of the emergency system as red lamps washed the room in an ominous glow. Guests gasped, some even laughing as if it were part of the entertainment. But something in the air said otherwise. This wasn't an accident. The shift in the atmosphere felt planned. In that instant of confusion, Ethan reacted with startling speed. Too much speed. His hand clamped around Linda's arm, tugging her away from the crowd, with purpose that made the hair rise on my neck. Under the cover of panic, he tried to disappear with her. A low warning escaped before the body moved on its own. "Don't let him take her." Pushing past startled guests, the path toward the door became clear. "Ethan." The call sliced through the noise, but he didn't stop. His grip on his mother tightened as he hurried toward the exit. Reaching them just in time, a hand grabbed his shoulder and spun him back. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" For a moment, panic flashed in his eyes before he masked it. "What do you mean, Dad? It's just the lights." "This isn't about the lights," came the response, low and sharp. "You're not fooling me." Before another word could be exchanged, the doors burst open. Uniformed officers flooded in boots, striking the floor in synchronized urgency. The timing was razor perfect. They zeroed in on Ethan and Lisa, who had materialized behind him, fingers already digging into her purse, no doubt reaching for the vial she'd hidden earlier. "Stop right there!" an officer barked. Panic overtook Ethan's features as the realization hit him. Years of cultivated composure crumbled in seconds. "This isn't what you think," he shouted, voice cracking as fear overtook arrogance. The officers closed in. One seized Ethan, pulling his arms behind him and fastening the cuffs with practiced precision. Another restrained Lisa. Her shock morphed into frantic denial. "No, this is a mistake," Michael, Dad, tell them. Nothing came. Words refused to form. Her betrayal, her willingness to harm Linda was too much to process, let alone defend. An officer rifled through Lisa's purse, then held up the vial. The very one intended for Linda. The proof glistened under the red emergency lights. A collective hush fell over the room, suffocating in its clarity. Guests stared, whispers rippling through the stunned silence. With both conspirators cuffed and escorted away, the world seemed to slow. A wave of bone-deep exhaustion crashed through, heavier than any triumph. Relief and grief tangled together, impossible to separate. Jake appeared at my side, pale but determined. "Grandpa, we did it. We stopped them." His words hung there, seeking validation. A long moment passed before an answer managed to surface. "Yeah," came the acknowledgement, thick with everything that wouldn't fit into words. But at what cost? No follow-up question came from Jake. His eyes said he understood. Linda remained near the doorway, dazed and confused, oblivious to how close she'd come to real danger. To her, it was nothing more than a ruined party brought on by a blackout. For everyone else, it had been the final unmasking of a betrayal so deep it left the soul hollow. Ethan had always pushed boundaries, but never in a million years did the mind imagine he'd sink this low, using sedatives on his own mother, all for inheritance and control. The weight of that truth hit harder than the arrest itself. A long, heavy breath escaped years of trust collapsing in a single exhale. The failure felt deeply personal. Allowing things to escalate this far, ignoring subtle signs, believing family loyalty would override greed. It was a mistake that would haunt the rest of my days. Jake waited, searching for some kind of reassurance. We stopped them, the words repeated, though they felt painfully insufficient. The night unraveled into a blur after that. Guests left in hushed clusters, each murmuring their shock as they exited. The house, once full of music and chatter, transformed into a hollow shell echoing with betrayal. What does a person do once everything familiar has been torn away? Once the people who should have protected one another instead proved capable of destruction? No answers came. Only the unsettling awareness that the truth had finally emerged. But the consequences were just beginning. The house stayed silent long after the police cars vanished down the street. A heaviness lingered in every corner, as if the walls themselves had absorbed the shock of what had unfolded. The air felt thick, almost suffocating, and each breath carried the weight of a betrayal that still didn't feel real. Ethan and Lisa, two people trusted above all, had been escorted out in handcuffs, and the aftershock left a hollow ache in the center of the room. Across from me, Jake sat stiffly, his hands gripping the armrest, as if bracing for another collapse. No tears tracked down his face, yet the redness in his eyes betrayed how close he was to breaking. He kept glancing toward the door, waiting for someone to walk in and say there'd been a mistake. But no miracle was coming. Nothing about this could be fixed. "Grandpa, are you okay?" he asked after a long pause, voice soft, almost fragile. An answer wouldn't form. What could possibly be said in a moment like that? He swallowed hard, trying again. "We did the right thing. Right, calling the police. Stopping them." His gaze searched my face, desperate for reassurance. A long breath escaped before any words did. "Not sure anymore, Jake. It felt right in the moment, but now, nothing feels clear." His jaw clenched. "You didn't have a choice. They were going to. A sharp interruption slipped out before it could be controlled. "There's no need to remind me." The edge in the voice surprised both of us. Another breath followed, slower this time. Didn't think it would be them. Not in a million years. That truth sat like a stone. A son, my son, had been capable of such cruelty. The thought still wouldn't settle in a way that made sense. The rain outside began to patter against the window, blurring the garden into a smear of gray. The scene from earlier replayed, despite efforts to push it away, Ethan gripping his mother's arm, trying to drag her out under cover of chaos. How had it come to that? How had the boy once raised with so much hope turned into a man willing to drug his own mother for profit? Regret started clawing at the edges again. Missed signs. Blind trust. A lifetime spent believing blood was enough to bind people together. Grandpa Jake whispered, trying to pull me back from the spiral we did protect her. We stopped them. Did we? The question came out softer, heavier, or did we just interrupt something before it happened? The investigation loomed large in the background. The police had starter pieces, sedatives, paperwork, a handful of suspicious witnesses, but the masterminds behind the scheme were still out there. Ethan and Lisa were only the visible part of something larger, a doctor willing to falsify mental evaluations, a lawyer who arrived like a shadow, others who stayed hidden in the web. That uncertainty gnawed hard. Stopping 2 people wasn't enough, not when an entire structure had already been built around them. A sudden movement pushed me from the chair, making Jake flinch. Thoughts had turned into action without warning. "This can't go any further," the words slipped out. Jake stood quickly. "Grandpa, what are you going to do?" Staring at him, the only truth that surfaced was simple. "Not sure. But something has to be done." Concern filled his eyes. Fear, too. Not just fear for Linda, fear for what more the hidden conspirators might try. Fear of the unknown ahead. And buried beneath that fear for me. He wasn't wrong to feel it. The dread was mutual. The longer the mind churned, the clearer the path became. Protecting Linda wasn't enough anymore. The rest of the people involved had to be exposed, their network dismantled, their plans cut off before someone else paid the price. Linda deserved that. Jake deserved that. And maybe somewhere in the chaos it was something needed for myself as well, some form of redemption or clarity, or simply an end to the nightmare. Stepping toward the door carried a weight heavier than anything faced earlier. Jake followed closely, his steps quiet but uncertain. Neither of us spoke. Words felt useless. The phone rang late in the evening, a number I didn't recognize flashing across the screen. "Michael Davis," a voice asked when I picked up. The voice was calm, calculated, almost too professional. "Yes," I responded, trying to keep my voice steady. "I have information you might want to hear." The voice continued, and I felt a strange chill crawl up my spine. "It's about Ethan and Lisa." I straightened, my pulse quickening. "Go on," I said, leaning forward. "They're not working alone," the voice said, and my heart sank. "They're part of a much bigger scheme. A network of people involved in elderly exploitation." I swallowed hard, trying to process the words. "What do you mean, elderly exploitation?" There's a doctor. Dr. Caldwell, the one who assessed your wife's mental competence. He's been involved in similar cases before, cases that were swept under the rug. Ethan and Lisa. They're just pawns in a much larger operation. They've been working with financial advisors, lawyers, even medical professionals. It's all connected. The words echoed in my head. It wasn't just my son and daughter-in-law trying to take advantage of Linda's assets. There was a whole system in place, and my family was now entangled in it. How do you know all this? I asked, suspicion creeping in. You don't need to know that. What matters is what you do with the information. I suggest you act fast, Michael. This is bigger than you think. The call ended abruptly, cutting through the room with a finality that left the air unnervingly still. No words came, not because there weren't any, but because my mind couldn't form them. The phone sat on the table where I'd dropped it, and a tremor I couldn't control ran through my hand. That conversation carried a weight I wasn't prepared for. Pieces of truth were finally lining up, but none of them matched the picture I thought I knew. This had never been just a family betrayal. Something far more calculated was taking shape. Dr. Caldwell's name wouldn't leave my head. For years, he'd overseen Linda's evaluations, polished, confident, always draped in credibility. Now, knowing he'd taken part in similar cases twisted everything I believed about him. Men like Caldwell didn't stumble into corruption. They stepped into it for profit, and they did it with precision. Suddenly, Ethan and Lisa felt small. Their greed was destructive, yes, but they weren't the masterminds. They were just eager recruits in a machine that had been running long before they joined it. The deeper the realization dug, the heavier my ribs felt. How many households had been stripped apart by this? How many elders had been funneled through the same system, unaware of the trap tightening around them? Questions came faster than answers, each one carved deeper into my nerves. And the more I grasped for clarity, the more distant the truth became. Panic edged in slow at first, then sharp enough to sting. This wasn't a matter of confronting my son anymore. It was a confrontation with people who were organized, comfortable, manipulating the weak, and shielded by titles that made them untouchable. The chair dipped under me as I leaned back, eyes fixed on the black screen of the phone. A colder fear settled in my bones. Ethan and Lisa were only the tip of something layered, something careful. This network thrived through medical authority legal loopholes and faces the public trusted without question. Expecting the police to fully understand the scope felt foolish. What they had so far barely skimmed the surface. Linda still needed protection. The whole operation needed to be exposed. But whichever direction I turned, risk waited real, immediate, and tightening with every passing hour. The phone buzzed again. Jake. Are we going to the police now? Do we tell them about the doctor? After a long pause, my reply formed. Not yet. We need more. There's more to this than we know. Even as the message sent, doubt pressed in. What if waiting gave them room to bury evidence? Time was running thin. Whatever Ethan and Lisa had done out of greed, this network operated with precision. The realization settled heavily. This went far beyond family betrayal. They weren't just targeting Linda's estate. They were exploiting entire lives. Several days of combing through documents and calls had left my nerves raw. But the pieces were finally aligning. Guilt and hesitation faded, replaced by resolve. I dialed the detective handling the case. Everything's in place, I said. Let's move. No hesitation came back. We'll have officers ready. Hold tight. Hanging up brought a sharp twist in my gut. The children I had trusted were about to face a truth they'd spent months trying to hide. Jake, I called. He stepped into the room. What's happening? We're taking action, and we're making sure this ends here. His eyes flickered with fear and determination. I'm going with you. This isn't something you need to see. I said, though. His steady nod told me he wasn't stepping aside. The police arrived quickly. Everyone knew their position. I stayed close to Jake. No one could predict how Ethan would react. When I walked into the room where Ethan and Lisa were seated, a shift rippled immediately. Ethan straightened, irritation flashing across his face. "Dad, what is this?" The silence before my answer was deliberate. "It's over," I said. "The game is up." Confusion slid into panic. "What are you talking about?" Officers stepped forward. "We have evidence of your involvement in financial coercion, medical fraud, and attempted exploitation," I said. "You're both under arrest." Ethan shot from his chair, but an officer blocked him. "Don't the officer warned?" Lisa scrambled toward me. "Michael, please, this is being blown out of proportion. We were protecting the family. By drugging your mother, by taking her assets. That's protection." The disbelief in my voice did the rest. She froze. There was nothing left to explain. Cuffs clicked into place. Ethan's bravado dissolved. Lisa went pale. The truth wasn't a secret anymore. It was out in the open for everyone to see. Jake stayed behind me, jaw tight, as he watched his father and aunt being led out. "Grandpa, we really did it," he said. "We stopped them," I answered. "Now we make sure no one else ends up in their hands." The officers escorted them out. The house fell silent again, but the air felt different, lighter, even with the grief underneath. Jake stood beside me, steadier than he had been all night. For the first time in weeks, the world felt like it was shifting back into something that resembled order. It wasn't over yet. But the worst was behind us. And that was enough for now. The months after the trial blurred together. Days passed slowly at first, then all at once leaving behind only the echo of what had happened. Ethan and Lisa had received their sentences. Years of their lives were gone, carved out by their own actions. Watching them led away in handcuffs didn't bring relief or closure, only a hollow quiet. A lifetime spent believing in loyalty and family had shattered. I had lived by the idea that love meant sacrifice, that I should give everything even when it cost me. But all that trust, everything I gave, had been returned with deceit. Reconciling that truth was the hardest part. Not the courtrooms, not the evidence, the aftermath, the silence, the knowledge that my own son had tried to dismantle everything I had built. Yet something shifted in that void. Fear had ruled me for too long, fear of being hurt, of being betrayed, of losing the people I loved. I couldn't keep living like that. Not anymore. Letting go of the anger wasn't simple. But it came slowly because holding it felt like feeding the very thing that had broken us. I couldn't change the past. I could only stop letting it control the future. I didn't forgive Ethan. That kind of forgiveness required forgetting the truth, and I wasn't willing to do that. But I didn't hate him. Hate would only bind me to him. Distance was the only choice. No visits, no letters, no attempts to rebuild what could never be restored. He had made his decisions. Now I had to make mine. Lisa drifted into the same category, a closed door I no longer intended to open. They would face their consequences without my involvement. I refused to let their choices shape the rest of my life. Leaving the old house was harder than I expected. Every corner held a memory, good ones, painful ones, moments that now felt like fragments of a life that no longer belonged to me. But staying there meant living in the shadow of everything that had fallen apart, and I needed space to breathe. So I sold it. A small home on the outskirts of town became my refuge. I began volunteering with a charity that protected elders from financial and medical exploitation cases too similar to Linda's to ignore. It felt right. Not as redemption, but as a way to ensure the cycle ended somewhere. Helping others gave shape to the empty space that betrayal had left behind. Slowly, I rebuilt myself. Not into the man I had been, that man had lived too long in denial, but into someone steadier, someone who understood that love wasn't blind, that boundaries were necessary, and that protecting yourself was as important as protecting the people you cared for. Jake visited often. He was growing into himself, carrying the weight of everything he had witnessed, but refusing to let it turn him bitter. I saw resilience in him, quiet, steady, earned the hard way. The future remained uncertain, but uncertainty no longer scared me. One evening, as I stood in the small garden behind my new home, watching the light fade across the sky, a calmness settled in. The road ahead wasn't mapped, but it was mine now, unburdened by old betrayals.